The arena has gone some huge changes this week, and I figured instead of just going through the patch notes and telling you everything that has happened in the latest overhaul for the Illuvium Ascendant Arena, I thought I would take you through an entire match of play and help break down every little aspect that is the same and that has changed. And at the end, I'll give my own thoughts and opinions on what I do and don't like about the new update. That way, it will be much easier for you to remember it, follow along, and then know what to do when you jump into the game yourself. Now, I will be using the really standard Ramfire Revenant team. I don't know how to play it at all. I suck with it. But you will understand how the game is played, and some of the really major changes that have happened are going to be really important from this. So let's jump straight into it. Here, the game starts, and it looks all really similar from here. Now, you will notice that you will only have stage 1 alluvials in your team. You will see that right here. You will only have, if I go back a little bit. Oh, I missed out this. Okay, so before the game even starts, you're going to choose from 3 augments, okay? These augments are very similar to the ones we had before, but they're a lot simpler and they have really great effects. And they're all free to play, and we'll go over that in a second. This critical chaos one has on crit gain 5 attack damage, nothing too crazy. Hyperkinetic is gain 20 omega power, and on takedown get 10 more omega power. Very, very good for a Ramfire in particular. And then third, we have the Omnigetic Modulator, which is an on omega enemy loses omega power equal to 5% of holders omega power. Also very, very good. Probably would have been better on a Dorius. I put it on a Ramfire in this case. Anyways. So you go through and you can see that there are only stage 1 alluvials in this team. That is because after you play a stage 1, you will have the opportunity to ascend them into a stage 2 and a stage 3. As you can see down at the bottom here, right there is a ram fight. I do not have enough mastery points to play it, but I would be able to ascend my Ramfy into a ram fight. Now, when I stop hovering over these, you can see that little icon right that way somewhere, right next to the little infinity icon. There's an icon there, and then on the left of that there's a 0. That's how many ascension tokens you have in the game, and these ascension tokens signify how often you can ascend an alluvial. Now, the rules for this are actually quite simple. You get 2 ascension tokens every turn. However, you only carry over 1 onto the next round. So in any given turn, you will have a maximum of 3 to play. Generally speaking, you will have 2. So as we go back into it, you can place the alluvials on the board. And since augments are free, you can actually place them on turn 1. I forgot to in this case. My opponent did not. Gave him a bit of an advantage. But you can play the very first augment you've pulled, which is one of my favorite things to start off this sort of update in the Illuvium ecosystem. But I'll talk about more on that later. First, let's just go through the rules and try and understand how the game is played. As you can see, the turns go through quite similarly. We'll see both players come in. I believe I lost this because his Ramfy was taking the full aggro, and so it got to cast significantly before my own. And obviously that nuked my entire team. Ramfy is still very good. The other thing we should note that since we have this whole ascension mechanic setting up, you cannot use multiples of something. For example, you cannot have a Ramfy, Ramfight, and Ramfire on the board at any given time. It's one or the other. Okay, you can only have one of a given line on the board at any given time. You can see these ones here. One of them was get 10% defense. One of them was get the Omega Power and things like that. So some really interesting ones here. I attached some to my Ramfy early on here because it will keep the augments as you ascend through, which I really, really like. It's a really great way to incorporate the evolution component of Illuvium into the game, into the Illuvium Arena game. Obviously, you can place more alluvials. One of the fascinating things with Ascension is your Ramfy costs 50. But to get to Ramfire, it only costs 50 more. You're not spending 100. You're not selling that full Ramfy, then putting the Ramfire on the board. You're only upgrading 50 more. So some of these stage 3s feel really cheap in comparison since you're ascending your alluvials, but you are losing an alluvial off the board. So it's a give and take, obviously. And I placed the Vermi. I think this is the correct order for this team, which is a negative thing I'll get to later. But there it is right there. It pass until they're fighting. You can see very, very simple. His Ramfire goes up first, and so mine loses. I'm not playing this perfectly, that's obvious, but it is what it is. I also keep forgetting to equip a weapon to my Ranger. So, like usual, you do get the Legendary Augment round. It works exactly the same. The augments are adjusted a little bit, but it's more that some of the really powerful ones were nerfed slightly. Everything else is pretty much the same. The other thing you should note is that it's in round 3 and 6, not round 4 and 6 or 7 or whatever it was. It is very, very different. I believe the second Legendary Augment round is in the same spot. The first one is a round earlier. So by round 3, you have 2 regular augments and a legendary augment. All 3 of them are free, not just the regular augment. As you can see, I placed some more alluvials and I'm starting to ascend. As you can see, I have 1 ascend token left over after this round is complete. And as we move over to the next round, you can see I did a lot better that round, even though I still I think I lose this one. So my 1 ascend token will roll over and I'll end up with 3. Whereas if you had 2, only 1 of them will roll over and you would essentially lose the ability to ascend, which is actually really, really valuable. When you think about it, you have 8 alluvials, all of which have the ability to ascend 3 times, which is 24 ascensions. And let's say by round 4, you have a total possible of about 10 ascension. So that's less than half of your total possible ascensions on the board. So you want to make sure you're ascending as often as you possibly can, but you can still leave 1 left over and you will not be wasting anything. If you leave 2 left over, you will be wasting your ability to ascend later on in the game. You need to keep that in mind while you're playing out the rounds. And don't forget to equip lots of weapons and suits and mix them up quite a bit. Your team size has now been adjusted to 50. You have plenty of space for not only alluvials, but all of your other equipment as well. Obviously, you are not adding augments into the team builder anymore. You can see that some of the augments are really, really cool. Gain a thorn every time you are hit. Gain thorns off the bat and things like that. And you can see that as we go through, I get absolutely wrecked here. But now I'm going to start critiquing, because this is where I started to have an issue. I did really well with this round. I positioned, let's say, perfectly in this round. For the next round, it was a little bit of a guessing game. I had the ability to completely swap everything I had onto the other side of the board, which I'm not convinced is the right way to go about the Illuvium arena and not really what it should be encouraging. Now, my opponent actually did the same, but a little bit less harshly, and so he won the round. But the ability to do this is a little bit rough. Obviously, without full ascension tokens, it's really hard to pivot full comps, even though you get 1 ascension token refunded from a stage 3 alluvial, nothing from a stage 2 alluvial. It's really hard to be able to pivot into something completely different. However, it's not very difficult as you have an abundance of mastery points. You actually move your alluvials from one side of the board to the other, and so on and so forth. So I think the augments being free is really great, but they are limiting some of this decision-making space that doesn't force people into a corner nearly as much. And since the rounds go for such a long time, you can see that I lost 4 rounds in a row and still have some... I lost, 4 rounds in a row and I still have some HP left, is saying that it's really hard to eliminate players now, since augments aren't counting to the damage you deal to your opponent's Mozart anymore, I don't believe. So it's really hard to eliminate them early. And because of that, everyone has the chance to go pretty much full freedom at the end of the game, and there's not a whole lot else they can do. That being said, like, I couldn't switch to a full Colossus team because I would need to be able to ascend so many alluvials, and I just can't do that. And so I think that has its benefits as well, and you need to play around as you're going along the game for that reason. But the other part of things is if your opponent gets really good augments, it can leave you at a slight disadvantage, but there are so few of them, and they're decently impactful, but nothing too crazy, and so I don't think it's too insane. Now, let's talk about some good things of this new Illuvium beta. It's simplified a lot of the processes. The team builder feels kind of daunting since there's 50 cards you can add now, but at the same time, you don't need augments. So it's just pick all of the alluvial, a lot of fire alluvials or a lot of air alluvials, because there was one last thing I forgot to mention. And I'm going to see if I can show you this easily without showing my entire desktop. There we go. Look at this on the left in a late game team composition. I have 5 empath, 3 mystic, 3 rogue, 2 revenant, 3 spore, 3 fire, 2 inferno, and so on and so forth. That is because every alluvial applies both synergies. This is something I've actually wanted since the very beginning, and I was surprised that they didn't do it this way. I think it actually made a lot of sense, but it makes even more sense now to do it because you can't just keep all your stage 1 alluvials on the board. So getting those basic synergies would have been basically impossible. But what happens now is your Blazer Knight, for example, will grant empath to your entire team. This is based on their stage 1 for every single line. Ramfy is fire and rogue, and so the dominance for Ramfire will always be fire and rogue. That is basically how it works. But I love that you can actually build up these crazy basic synergies on top of everything else while you're playing the game. Now, unfortunately, it has a little bit of a limiting space. For example, you guys know I love Magma because I love Scoriox. And Scoriox and Seer are both fire, even though I would have rathered building up Earth synergies with those two in particular. Even though they're Magma, they are both fire because Flare and Fiery are both fire type alluvials. So there is a little bit of limit there, but overall, I think it's a really awesome system. It opens up, hopefully will open up the meta to a lot of different kinds of teams. You can build up 7 fighter, but even while you've got 7 fighter, you've got all these behemoths and you've got Templars and all the rest of it. And so you're building up this crazy squad of alluvials over time during the course of a battle, and the positioning becomes a lot more crucial. My only issue with that is that the decision space for positioning kind of falls off later in the game as you have infinite mastery points, essentially. So that system is really awesome. The new system where you get augments every round, once you start to get the hang of the augments, it's not too bad. Until then, it's a little bit daunting, but it's definitely better than having it in your team. All the augments being free is also a really great change. I'm really enjoying it. The Ascension system has been the hardest thing for me to grasp so far. I'm slowly getting used to it, but managing those Ascension tokens over the course of a game is actually way more challenging than I ever thought it would be. So I'm enjoying learning this new aspect of the game, but I'm not going to lie to you and say that I'm not struggling unlearning everything I learned and trying to relearn the entire game from scratch. So if you're in that position as well, you are not alone. There are a lot of people that feel that way, but it's just the nature of it. I think for new players coming in, I wouldn't say it's necessarily easier than the version before, but it would be about the same for someone entering into the game. If they pick up someone else's team, then not too bad either, and they don't have to worry about augments, so the decision space for them early on in the game is a lot smaller, but later on in the game, you're still trying to hit a very specific team comp. There's not a whole lot of forking or pivoting at the end of the game, and although Hyper got a really big buff, the range for Hyper is really wide, so it's a lot more generalized. It's a lot more an entire Earth team beats an entire Fire team, rather than a Titanor beats a Ramfire. A Ramfire still destroys Titanor every single day of the week. Maybe that's because Inferno is so strong, it's hard to say, but a Ramfire seems to always win, even though Titanor has an insane hyper advantage against it. I would like to see that fixed in the future, but for now, I think the game's in a really good place. It's upgrading, it's getting further, it needs some minor balancing tweaks, but I don't think the balance is too bad. We're seeing a lot of Ramfire and Revenant, but maybe someone will find something that beats it, and I really hope they do. If you learned something new about the Illuvium Ascendant Arena, please let me know down below. Please don't forget to like and comment. Please don't forget to share this around. If you want more people to learn about Ascendant mode and Illuvium in general, then share this video around. It will help everyone out. Don't forget to subscribe.